Hi, welcome back to the Britt Show. I've got a spicy conversation for you guys because a couple days ago, I saw the big news hit about the Supreme Court considering hearing the case on same-sex marriage, and I decided to share the news report as a journalist to ask a question. Do we believe that society has become better or worse in the 10 years since Obergefell, which was the ruling that ruled same-sex marriage a federal right in America? The comment section on my post lit up, and I wasn't surprised. I know that this has been an emotional topic for a long time, but I also think that when we are looking at possibly the Supreme Court could overturn a major piece of American history, as in Roe v. Wade just a few years ago, I think it's important to talk about it, to get the facts straight, to get the emotions outside of the room just for a minute, and to just walk through the facts. So that's what we're going to do, and I hope you'll join me for the rest of this episode. All right, let's get into the historical context of same-sex marriage in the United States, because it's important to remember that there is history behind this, that same-sex marriage was not a part of the fabric of America from inception. So let's look at the historical context. So same-sex marriage was legalized nationwide in 2015 through the Supreme Court's landmark ruling of Obergefell versus Hodges, which held that the 14th Amendment's due process and equal protection clauses guarantee marriage rights to same-sex couples. Now, what's interesting is prior to this ruling, 35 states banned same-sex marriage. 8 explicitly allowed them. Now, since the decision of Obergefell, an estimated 823,000 same-sex couples have married, with nearly 1 in 5 raising children under the age of 18. Okay, California has a huge role in all of this. So twice, California voters, and I remember living through this because I'm a California girl, and I remember seeing all the signs up on the freeway. It was a huge deal in California because twice California voters rejected same-sex marriage through ballot measures. Now, in 2000, Proposition 22 passed with a 61% approval rating, which added a statutory ban defining marriage as between a man and a woman. You guys, this is California. This is California just a couple decades ago. Isn't that crazy? This followed earlier domestic partnership laws, but it limited full marriage rights. Now, here's where Gavin Newsom comes into the picture, you guys. This is where he springs into the limelight in 2004. So in 2004, Mayor Gavin Newsom, he was a shiny young little guy at the time. He defied state laws by directing city officials to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples, resulting in over 4,000 ceremonies. Now, the California Supreme Court said, hold up, little mayor out in San Francisco, those are invalid, and they ended up invalidating all of those marriages. But his actions were dubbed the Winter of Love, and it galvanized national attention. You guys, if you lived through this in 2004, you remember it. It was a huge, huge deal. And this contributed to the 2008 state Supreme Court ruling that struck down the ban as unconstitutional. Now, this briefly legalized same-sex marriage from June to November 2008, but then voters approved Proposition 8 in November 2008, with 52% support amending the state constitution to ban it again and halting new marriages until federal courts later invalidated Proposition 8 in 2013. So Newsom, who's now the governor, has continued to advocate for LGBTQ plus rights. And again, that's really important to remember that this is where he comes from. This was really what landed him a name. It's what put him on Larry King Live with John MacArthur and a bunch of senators at the time. And he was just a little freshman. Like, he was a young, shiny he looked like a used car salesman. He was super shiny and young. And this is how he really came into the scene, was on the whole LGBTQ plus progressiveness. So it makes sense that he is continuing to be a voice for LGBTQ plus rights. That should give you a really good overview of the historical context of same-sex marriage in America federally, and how the 14th Amendment is a big player in that. And then it also should give you a good view of California's role in same-sex marriage and how it kind of all is connected. So let's talk about where we're at now. So in 2022, Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization overturned Roe v. Wade. And this, I don't know if you guys remember, but at the time when I was in Palm Springs, I remember when Roe was overturned. And I remember right away hearing alarms about other rights now being jeopardized. And I'm going to say rights in quotes being jeopardized based on the whole due process issue. And that includes same-sex marriage. Clarence Thomas explicitly suggested revisiting Obergefell, which legalized same-sex marriage, in his concurrence, arguing that Obergefell lacked constitutional basis, while Justices Samuel Alito and others criticized it for impacting religious liberty. This was a huge deal, and it kind of it got really loud and then it got really quiet. And I think why is because there is legitimacy to the concerns, and so those who are for same-sex marriage got really nervous and wanted to just make it go away. Let's not talk about it. Let's keep it quiet. And that's kind of what happened. So here we are 3 years later. Now, Kim Davis is going to be a player that you're going to hear in the coming months, and I'm going to tell you why. So Kim Davis in 2015 was a clerk of Rowan County, Kentucky. She refused to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples, and she cited her religious beliefs. I don't know if you guys remember, but she made big headlines because it led to her jailing for 6 days on contempt charges. And she was the sole authority for issuing licenses under state law. So she became this symbol of religious liberty and religious defiance, and it cost her. A same-sex couple, David Ermold and David Moore, sued Davis for denying their license, which resulted in a jury that awarded them $100,000 in emotional damages, $260,000 in attorney's fees, and then lower courts, including the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, rejected Kim Davis's First Amendment defenses, ruling that she violated the couple's rights under Obergefell. Okay, this would be 10 years ago. This is all taking place in 2015. Well, last month, Kim Davis filed a petition for writ of certiorari asking the Supreme Court to overturn Obergefell entirely. Now, this is the first direct challenge of Obergefell like this since 2015. And her lawyers argue that the ruling is egregiously wrong. They even use the term legal fiction, and they're urging the court to treat it like Roe v. Wade, which goes back to what I said just a few moments ago. And they're asking that marriage definitions be returned to the states with existing same-sex marriages potentially grandfathered in. That is the ask. That brings us to where we are today, which is why I shared this across my social media, which is why it's really good to follow and make sure that you find me, because sometimes it's hard to find me on Rooted Wings on Instagram and Twitter, because we talk about these things. I don't hide away from difficult conversations. It is very, very important that we understand that politics affects people because people affect politics. So it's a constant churning motion that's important to talk about. So Davis's attorney is Matthew Staver, and he claims that Obergefell has zero constitutional basis and that it infringes on religious freedoms. He actually cited Chief Justice John Roberts' original dissent and Thomas's post-Dobbs comments. They positioned Davis, who again was jailed, as the, quote, first individual jailed for following religious convictions on marriage. And again, they're emphasizing that her First Amendment protections for her actions were demolished in all of this 10 years ago. Legal scholars at this point, it's all over the place. I don't know really where to land on it, but I think this is interesting, and it does show a shift happening in culture, and it's something we should talk about. We should talk about major legal decisions that we can remember a time before Obergefell, and we can remember a time after Obergefell in our lifetime. And we should ask the question, has it made us better and healthier and stronger as a society? Has it contributed to health and bettering society, or has it not? What have been the implications? Did it open up the door? Was it a gateway drug to anything else that we are now dealing with in society? Important questions to ask. So support for same-sex marriage stands at 69% among Americans as of May 2024, 83% of Democrats, 74% independents, 46% of Republicans in favor. The Supreme Court will consider the petition in a private conference on September 29th, 2025. So if granted, if they pick this up, then oral arguments would occur in late 2025 or early 2026 with a decision by June 2026. So those are the dates to watch on all of this. And then if denied, lower court rulings will still stand. So that's where we're at as of today, which is, I am recording this on August 12th, 2025. Okay, let's talk about the broader implications if overturned. If Obergefell is overturned, it would allow states to ban same-sex marriages again, though the 2022 Respect for Marriage Act requires interstate recognition of valid marriages. So that is important, okay? And this could limit where couples marry, and it could spark renewed state battles. So it could obviously cause new complications when it comes to same-sex unions. Let's talk through the biblical perspective in all of this. I am a Christian. I don't hide from that. And I think it's really important for me to be completely transparent with you that that absolutely is a guiding light in how I see the world and how I see matters such as this. And I will say that I do not hide from the fact that I am a Christian and I see the world through a biblical worldview. That is not going to change. And it would be crazy if I claimed to be a Christian and then dismiss everything in the Bible. I am bound to the Bible, and you can blame it on the scriptures for my perspective, but I do want to give you a firm biblical perspective on all of this because it matters as Christians that we are able to talk through these issues and not hide away in a corner and pretend like we just don't want to engage. It is so important that we become literate in the Bible and that we're able to express our biblical worldview when it comes to very, very important topics in society, culture, and politics. So we would point to Genesis 2:18 through 24 as the foundational text for marriage. Now, this is where God creates Eve as a suitable helper for Adam. And he declares that a man shall leave his parents and unite with his wife to become one flesh. This is the establishment of marriage across the board. This is the complementary union between a man and a woman, and it reflects God's original design for humanity before the fall. Super important, guys. That's where marriage comes from. That is the starting point. That is the origin of the term marriage. Now, in Matthew 19:4 through 6 and Mark 10:6 through 9, Jesus reaffirms the Genesis account by stating that from the beginning, God made humans male and female, and for this reason, a man joins his wife, becomes one flesh, which no one should separate. And we obviously take this as a divine standard, that the standard is marriage is between one man and one woman. Now, whenever I've talked through this, I get questions on, well, what about David in the Bible, the man after God's own heart who had all those wives, polygamy? Like, that's usually the pushback that comes when we talk through this is the standard. This is the biblical standard. This is the original design. So the answer to that is yes. The Old Testament absolutely records instances of polygamy and horrific things, like David had his chief soldier murdered after he slept with his wife and got her pregnant and then married her. And he still had like a ton of other women. So yeah, there are screwed up people in the Bible, in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, 100%. But we would say that that's not God's ideal. God works through flawed humans throughout history. We're all flawed. So God doesn't condone that. He is using people through all the brokenness of history to exact his perfect plan. That's the answer to that. So yes, the Bible consistently portrays monogamy as the norm, with commands like those in 1 Timothy 3:2 that requires church leaders to be the husband of one wife, reinforcing one man, one woman as the prescribed model. There is no room for the prescription being polygamy or homosexuality. None. It does not exist. Now, it's really important too to understand that as Christians, we believe that marriage, this special sacred covenant is a reflection of Christ and the church. And that's the broad, big picture. That's the origin point, come all the way to fruition at the end, is this beautiful picture of Christ and the church. So Ephesians 5:22 through 33 describes marriage as a profound mystery, symbolizing Christ's sacrificial love for the church, with husbands loving wives as Christ loves the church, and wives submitting as the church to Christ. Now, this limits marriage to heterosexual pairs. Again, male and female. The church is described as a bride, and Christ is described as the bridegroom. It is extremely explicit on male and female, again, mirroring the distinct complementary view of male and female in marriage. It's extremely important. And then lastly, procreation and family structure. So Genesis 1:28 commands humans to be fruitful and to multiply. And we obviously see this as absolutely inextricably tied to male and female union. You cannot get fruitful offspring in society with two men or two women. The design is male and female. Yes, there are really sad issues that come up where men and women get married and they can't have babies, and it's really sad, or they don't choose to have babies. But the norm and the only way that babies happen is male and female, not two men, not two women. They can try until, what's the term, the cows come home. You can't make a baby with two men or two women. So because of that, marriage provides the stable, God-ordained environment for raising children, for nurturing children, for bringing life into this world, and it models biblical roles and values, and it protects societal issues like fatherlessness, which is really important. That's such a plague on our nation right now, is the issue of fatherlessness. The biblical ordained model is a husband and a wife with children in a perfect, beautiful covenant union. And I would say perfect being because it's three strands. God is involved in that covenant, which makes it a perfect covenant that should not be broken. We also believe as Christians that this leads to societal stability. So biblical marriage fosters strong families as the building blocks of society. It promotes commitment, fidelity, self-sacrifice, and it should reduce social ills like divorce, poverty, and crime. True biblical marriages are the bedrock to society. And we would argue that adhering to this model upholds moral order, that it pushes back against the deviations of modern progressive society, that it keeps us strong and healthy. Loss of traditional values have historically been a destruction to societies. We see that again and again and again. Because of all of that, we hold to the biblical framework as Christians of marriage being a good, God-ordained, important thing in society that is explicitly between one man and one woman. That is actually the definition of marriage. Anything outside of that would not be marriage. And so it's really important for when we're talking about this and we hear same-sex marriage, well, that's actually twisting a term. It's very, very, very similar to what is a woman. Well, a woman now have been born a man and could still have male genitalia. Well, we would say, well, that's not a woman. That's a man who is claiming to be a woman. It's the same logic, and it's the same position of holding firm to what we know is true, the true origin point, the true definition of something that is good and holy and really built the world was male and female. So that's all for today. That's your deep dive into what's going on with all of this, with the Supreme Court possibly hearing Obergefell. We will be waiting to see if that date actually happens. We would know in the next couple months. So in the next month. So keep your eyes and ears peeled. I will be continuing to cover it on Rooted Wings, both on Instagram and on X. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe. We push out amazing conversations once a week so that we can order our affections and our mindset rightly in a very loud and noisy world to cut through the noise. So until then, stay strong in your convictions, and I'll see you next time.